Friends, do you know that who received the very first Nobel Prize in Physics? In 1895, German physicist Wilhelm Roentgen, who was experimenting with the cathode rays in a gas discharge tube, and he observed that screen coated with fluorescent material placed near the tube would glow even when it was not directly in path of cathode rays. He discovered that this new type of radiation could penetrate through many types of matter that were opaque to visible light, and that it could produce images of internal structure of solid objects, including human tissues. Roentgen called this new radiation X-rays. Roentgen's discovery revolutionized the medical diagnosis and treatment, allowing doctors to see inside the body without surgery. The first medical X-ray was taken by Roentgen himself of his wife's hand, and the first medical use of X-ray was in diagnosing a broken bone. Roentgen was awarded Nobel Prize in Physics in 1901 for his discovery of X-ray, and the technology has continued to develop and improve over the past centuries, with applications in medicine, industry, and scientific research. Radiation hazards have been recognized since the discovery of X-rays. However, it was until the 1940s and 1950s that the full extent of radiation hazard became apparent. During World War II, the United States government began to conduct extensive research into nuclear weapons, which required the development of methods to produce, store, and handle radioactive materials. This led to numerous accidents, such as the criticality accident at the Hanford site in 1945, which resulted in the deaths of 3 workers and release of a significant amount of radioactive material. The most well-known incident involving radiation exposure occurred in 1986 with the explosion at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine. The explosion released a large amount of radioactive material into the environment, leading to numerous deaths and illnesses among the workers and nearby residents. Another well-known incident is the Fukushima nuclear disaster, which occurred in Japan in 2001. An earthquake and tsunami damaged the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant, causing a release of radioactive material into the environment and resulting in evacuation of nearby residents. Friends, in today's video, we are going to explore how man can expose to radiation and which are the effects it can cause to our health. Let us first try to understand which are the sources of radiation. It is quite common to encounter radioactive material in nature, which are typically not harmful in their natural state. Hence, it is crucial to comprehend the proportion of naturally occurring radioactive material in one encounters on a daily basis. Natural sources. Food, one of the most commonly encountered sources of natural radiation, is one that many people don't suspect. Bananas, due to its high potassium content. The banana equivalent dose is an informal measure used to compare ionizing radiation exposure to the radiation dose one can receive from consuming an average sized banana. It is intended as simple educational tool to help people understand and contextualize level of radioactivity. Cosmic rays, the sun. A significant amount of cosmic radiation comes from the sources beyond our solar system. Fortunately, Earth's magnetosphere and the ozone layer intercept and absorb the majority of this energy, which is crucial for safeguarding the life on our planet. Individuals serving as a flight crew on long distance and high altitude flight are typically experiences 30% more radiation exposure annually compared to an average person. Environment. India is known to have a high levels of terrestrial radiation in some regions due to presence of radioactive minerals in soil and the rocks. The state of Kerala, located in the southern part of India, is known for its high levels of natural radiation. The region is enriched with monazite sand, which contains thorium, a radioactive element. As a result, people living in certain parts of Kerala are exposed to higher levels of radiation compared to other parts of India. However, the levels are generally within the safe limits and do not pose a significant risk to human health. Atmospheric. Radon, being a gas, can become a problem in some houses and other buildings, seeping in usually through the cracks in solid foundation and accumulating in rooms with poor ventilation. Thoron is a radioactive gas that occurs naturally in Earth's atmosphere. However, the levels of radon and thoron in atmosphere are typically very low and do not pose any significant risk to human health. Inside our body. Yes, you may be surprised to know that our body also contains radioactive material. As our body is made up of the element in the environment, it also contains radioactive materials like carbon C14 and potassium 40. It is interesting to know that this decay of C14 present in organism is used to determine the age of sample fairly accurately around 45,000 years, known as radiocarbon dating. All in all, it is estimated that the total natural radiation to which the average person is subjected comes to approximately 0.1 rad a year. Man-made sources. Apart from the natural sources of the radiation, there are also human-made activities that generate radioactive materials that an average person might encounter frequently. However, the levels of exposure are relatively low. X-ray. Overall, the history of radiation hazards has been characterized by both the benefits and risks associated with its use. While radiation has many important applications, it is important to recognize and manage the potential hazards associated with its use. Medical and dental X-ray currently represent a primary source of human-made radiation exposure to the general population. X-ray have the potential to pose a health risk, particularly if someone is exposed to high doses over time. Patients, doctors, and medical technicians are at high risk. When optimum radiographic techniques are employed, the skin dose to the patient from a single X-ray film varies roughly from 0.02 to 3 rad. Nuclear fallout. Nuclear power is the first thing that comes to our mind when someone asks about the man-made sources of radiation. A certain quantity of radioactive fallout was released into the atmosphere as a result of the detonation of atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, as well as the nuclear weapon testing during the 1950s and 1960s. Nuclear explosion release a tremendous amount of energy in the form of heat, light, ionizing radiation, and many radioactive substances, the important being the isotopes of carbon C14, iodine I-31, cesium-137, and strontium-90. Cesium-137 and strontium-90 are considered most important because they are liberated in large amounts and remain radioactive for many years. The half-life of strontium-90 is about 28 years and that of cesium-137 is 30 years. Global level of atmospheric radioactive material were also affected by the 1986 explosion at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine, with a significantly greater impact in the immediate areas due to elements like strontium-90 and iodine-131. This resulted in a rise in the thyroid cancer incidence. Miscellaneous. Some everyday appliances like TV sets, luminous wristwatches are radioactive, but the radiation from these sources at present is too small to be important. Now let's talk about the types of radiation. Basically, it can be divided into ionizing radiation and non-ionizing radiation, depending upon its ability to penetrate tissue or not, respectively. Radiation that is capable of penetrating tissues and depositing its energy within them is referred to as ionizing radiation. There are two primary categories of ionizing radiation. One is electromagnetic radiations such as X-rays and gamma rays, and corpuscular radiations, which include alpha particles, beta particles, and protons. Compared to X-rays, beta particles, and gamma rays, alpha particles are 10 times more harmful. However, alpha particles do not have significant penetrating power, which is fortunate. Nevertheless, they pose a considerable risk if radioactive substances has entered the body through inhalation or a wound. Gamma rays and X-rays, on the other hand, have a short wavelength and are highly penetrating. While X-rays are human-made, gamma rays occur spontaneously during the disintegration of radioactive elements. Other than that, there is no substantial difference between gamma rays and X-rays. Ionizing radiation is also present in cosmic rays. Non-ionizing radiation refers to various forms of electromagnetic radiation that have wavelength longer than those of the ionizing radiation. Now let us talk about which are the biological effects of radiation. Radiation hazards are not limited to nuclear accidents. However, many individuals have been exposed to radiation through medical procedures such as X-ray and radiation therapy. While these procedures can be beneficial in treating and diagnosing medical conditions, they can also have harmful effects if not used properly. Although Henry Becquerel, who discovered the radiation phenomena, it was his doctoral student Marie Curie who named it radioactivity. Curie died in 1934 of aplastic anemia, probably developed from extended exposure to various radioactive materials, the dangers of which were only really understood long after most of her exposure had occurred. In fact, her papers and even her cookbook are still highly radioactive and many are considered unsafe to handle, stored in sealed boxes and requiring protective equipment to safely review. One of the first major events to highlight the dangers of ionizing radiation was the case of radium gulls, workers whose job was painting watch dials with radium. Though there was enough suspicion of the effect of ionizing radiation for the management of the company to take precautions, they offered none to the actual workers painting the watch dials. Many of them would lick their brushes to properly shape them. Since the human body treats radium as calcium, it was then deposited in the bones and led to radiation sickness. It is unknown how many died from radiation exposure. Biological effects of radiation are classified into two categories: acute or short-term effect because of the exposure to high doses of radiation over a brief period, and chronic or long-term effects from exposure to low doses of radiation over an extended period. High doses of radiation typically kill cells, leading to organ damage and possibly triggering an overall bodily response referred to as acute radiation syndrome. The effects of ionizing radiation can be somatic or genetic. Somatic immediate effects include radiation sickness, acute radiation syndrome. Delayed somatic effect includes leukemia, carcinogenesis, fetal developmental abnormalities, shortening of life, while genetic effects are chromosome mutations and point mutations. The biological response of high dose of radiation is as per the dose, like less than 5 rad, no immediate observable effects. 5 rad to 50 rad, slight blood changes may be detected by medical evaluations. 50 rad to 150 rad, slight blood changes will be noted and symptoms of nausea, fatigue, vomiting, etc. likely. 150 rad to 1100 rad. Severe blood changes will be noted and symptoms appear immediately. Approximately 2 weeks later, some of those exposed may die. At about 300 to 500 rad, up to one half of the people exposed will die within 60 days without intensive medical attention. Death is due to destruction of the blood forming organs. Without white blood cells, infection is likely. At the lower end of the dose range, isolation, antibiotics, and transfusion may provide the bone marrow, time to generate new blood cells, and full recovery is possible. At the upper end of the dose range, a bone marrow transplant may be required to produce new blood cells. 1100 to 2000. The probability of death increases to 100% within 1 to 2 weeks. The initial symptoms appear immediately. A few days later, things get very bad, very quickly since the gastrointestinal system is destroyed. Once the GI system ceases to function, nothing can be done, and medical care is for comfort only. More than 2000 Rad. Death is certain. At doses above 5000 Rad, the central nervous system can no longer control the body functions, including breathing and blood circulation. Everything happens very quickly and nothing can be done. Genetic effect. Somatic effects of radiation exposure are observable within the lifespan of the individual who has been irradiated, whereas genetic effects may be apparent in their distant offspring. Genetic effects arise from damage to chromosomes, including chromosome mutations and point mutations. Chromosome mutations may lead to sterility, while point mutation impact the genes directly. Now, how we can protect ourselves from radiation? Estimates suggest that the amount of radiation humans receive from outer space and background sources is around zero point 0.1 rad per year, which is not currently considered a hazard. However, the allowable additional dose from human made sources should not exceed 5 rad per year. Among human made sources, X rays are the most hazardous. Routine fluoroscopies, for instance, can deliver a dose of 4 rad to specific body part in just a minute. Therefore, it is advisable to avoid unnecessary X-ray examinations, especially for children and pregnant women. Ensuring adequate control and surveillance of X-ray installations, protecting workers, improving techniques, and reducing doses are essential in preventing unnecessary exposure to radiation. Effective protective measures include using proper lead seals and lead rubber aprons. Lead aprons that contains 0.5 mm of lead can reduce the intensity of scattered X-ray by over 90% and should be worn by all workers who regularly perform X-ray procedures. Worker must also wear a film badge or dosimeter that indicates their accumulated exposure to radiation since the last time the instrument was charged. Furthermore, workers' health must be maintained by providing them with periodic medical examinations, regular working hours, recreational times, and holidays. Radiation protection is relatively a new branch in the field of hygiene known as the radiation hygiene. Several organizations, including the International Commission on Radiological Protection, the International Atomic Energy Agency, and the World Health Organization, have been actively involved in this field. It has been recommended that genetic dose to the whole population from all sources additional to the background natural radiation should not exceed 5 rem over a period of 30 years. There has been a worldwide interest in preparing safety standards, codes of practice for the safe operation of nuclear power plants, and enunciating the basic principles of radiation protection. Lastly, we also want to know how radiation is measured, which are the units used for the measurement of the radiation. International System of Units (SI), which include becquerel, gray, and sievert, which is respectively radioactive decay per second, absorbed dose of ionizing radiation, and equivalent dose of ionizing radiation. Traditional units for measurement of radiations are Curie, Rad, and Rem for radioactivity of substance, radiation absorbed dose, and equivalent dose of ionizing radiation, respectively. Note that the SI units are preferred units for scientific and medical use, as they are internationally recognized and standardized. However, traditional units are still commonly used in some fields, particularly in the United States. It is important to be familiar with both systems of units when working with radiation. Friends, so this is all about radiation, its hazards on our body and various other systems. Hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to leave us like and subscribe the channel. See you in the next video really very soon.